Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is we know what Israel thinks about the Iranian deal, and we know what the Republican Party is thinking. But how much do we know about what the Iranians are thinking? What are Iranian leaders thinking about regarding the nuclear agreement? And better yet, what is in the minds of Iran's arch enemy, Saudi Arabia? Middle East leaders often communicate in the language of doublespeak. They say one thing to the greater Western world and something entirely different to their own people and their own press. The disparity is mind-boggling. The Twitter feed for Iranian President Rouhani is at Hassan Rouhani. Minutes after the nuclear deal announcement was made, Rouhani tweeted, quote, "We do not seek WMDs, nor exerting pressure on regional states. We call for greater brotherhood, unity, and further expansion of ties," unquote. Exactly 24 hours before the deal was struck, Rouhani posted another message to that same Twitter account. That message went like this: "Iran deal is the victory of diplomacy and mutual respect over the outdated paradigm of exclusion and coercion, and this is a good beginning," unquote. This tweet, by the way, a tweet that essentially asserts that a deal was in place a full day before it was announced, simultaneously by Barack Obama and the P5+1 leaders, was quickly taken down immediately after it was posted. That's what Rouhani, the puppet leader of Iran, was thinking. But what about Iran's true leader, the man who pulls the puppet strings? The Grand Ayatollah Khamenei, also known as the Supreme Leader, was speaking in a televised presentation ending Ramadan just before the deal was struck in Vienna. He said to his public, the people of Iran, quote, "We will never stop supporting our friends in the region, the people of Palestine, Yemen, Syria, Iraq, Bahrain, and Lebanon." He continued, "Even after this deal, our policy towards the arrogant U.S. will not change. We don't have any negotiations or deal with the U.S. on different issues in the world or the region," unquote. The Grand Ayatollah spent a considerable amount of time speaking about world arrogance. World arrogance in the Iranian, it's a catchphrase. It means the United States is trying to push their agenda and values on others. Here is more of what the Supreme Leader of Iran said about these issues. Quote, "We have repeatedly said we don't negotiate with the U.S. on regional and international affairs, not even on bilateral issues. There are some exceptions, like the nuclear program, that we negotiate with Americans to serve our interests. The Americans say that they stopped Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. They know it's not true. We had a fatwa. A fatwa is a law, a religious law. We had a fatwa declaring nuclear weapons to be religiously forbidden under Islamic law. It had nothing to do with the nuclear talks," unquote. As if he has not already made himself perfectly clear about this, his disdain for the United States is clear. Then the Ayatollah proceeds to explain his take on U.S. interests in the Middle East, saying, "Their actions in the region are 180 degrees different from ours." All the while, throughout his speech, there's background noise generated by a very frenzied crowd. And what are they shouting? Death to America and death to the Zionist state. Nothing happens in Iran without the direct approval of the Supreme Leader. Nothing. The Grand Ayatollah Khamenei signed off on the agreement, or it would not have been signed at all. He has the final say on all issues of Iran, especially foreign affairs. And yet, his tone when speaking before his own people seems pretty clear to me. And what does Saudi Arabia think? After the deal was announced, Saudi Foreign Minister al-Jubeir, went to Washington, D.C. Saudi Arabia's top diplomat visited the White House and also met with Secretary of State John Kerry. Publicly, he politely supported the deal as a positive step for the region. He was accepting of the deal but did not endorse it. He was reticent about giving too many details, explaining that the government of Saudi Arabia was still studying the agreement. The Saudi embassy in D.C. issued a statement saying, quote, Saudi Arabia has always been in favor of an agreement between Iran and the P5+1 group. But the embassy website speaks of very bold challenges to the agreement and to Iran. The comments are unattributed and written simply as a statement about the agreement. The statement says that Iran must use this new status to help those in the region and not support terror. The statement reads, quote, the agreement must include a specific, strict, and sustainable inspection regime of all Iranian sites, including military sites, as well as a mechanism to swiftly reimpose effective sanctions in the event that Iran violates the agreement. The statement continues, under the nuclear deal, Iran has to use its resources for domestic development and to improve the living conditions of its people rather than use it to incite turmoil in the region, which would only be met with harsh and determined responses from the countries of the region. The statement concluded by saying that since Iran is a neighboring country, the kingdom is looking forward to build the best of relations in all fields on principle of good neighborliness and non-interference in the affairs of others, unquote. Before, during, and now, after the signing of this nuclear deal with Iran, Saudi Arabia has repeatedly maintained that they want the same rights as Iran. The Sunnis of Saudi Arabia cannot and will not permit the Shiites of Iran to get the upper hand in the region and move towards improved nuclear technology under the safety shield of a signed and sealed deal. In other words, and it makes no difference what the language is, one thing is perfectly clear. The Middle East is gearing up for a nuclear arms race, and it has all been sanctioned by the P5+1. For several days now, I've been racking my brain trying to understand why the White House could be so convinced that the deal with Iran was such a good deal. Everywhere I looked, I saw flaws in the problems of this deal and problems in the contract. But I think I have now figured out what the administration sees. I still vehemently disagree with the agreement, but I understand their thought process now. Here is the White House's point of view. They want to stop the production of a nuclear weapon, not permanently, just for the next 15 years. In order to prevent the bomb from being dropped over the next 15 years, the president and his staff put two essential items into the agreement. The agreement reduces the number of centrifuges from 20,000 to 5,060, and all of those centrifuges will be the old IR-1 type centrifuges. Next, the agreement also demands that Iran reduce the amount of uranium from 10 tons of low-enriched uranium at 3.5% to 300 kilos. This will make it very difficult to create a bomb because an effective nuclear bomb requires 90 to 95% enriched uranium. About 1 ton of that uranium is what's needed to make a single weapon. Not as important to the White House, but also stipulated in the agreement, is that the arms embargo stay in place for another 15 years. Now, if Israel was to make and to initiate a military strike, they would only delay the capability of Iran to develop a bomb for about 7 to 8 or maybe at most 10 years. So the White House thinks that what they've accomplished is a much better deal. They have 15 years, which is an additional 5 to 7 years over a military strike. The White House is also wishfully hoping that within the next 15 years, there will be a regime change in Iran. And therefore, they believe that their plan is the best plan to keep the region safe and even Israel safe. Again, I disagree, but rumors abound. One of them is that part of the so-called carrot that Israel will be given as a result of the Iranian deal is the release of Jonathan Pollard. The United States Department of Justice, I should say, is saying that they will not object to the release of Pollard in November of this year, when he reaches the 30th year in prison. While the potential release of Pollard makes sense, it in no way makes the Iran deal any less risky. It does, however, make the bitter pill a little easier to swallow. For years, the idea of releasing Pollard from the U.S. prison, where he's been serving time after being convicted of spying against the United States, has been dangled in front of Israel. Each time it turned out to be nothing more than diplomatically orchestrated gimmicks. The U.S. administration knows that, and that from the point of view of Israel, this deal with Iran needs to be sweetened. Israel will certainly present a huge shopping list to the United States. Most of the items on the list will be on the security side. Pollard is entirely different. His release might make Israelis more comfortable with the deal, but if it does not happen, their frustration will reach new heights. Since we've been spending so much time on the Iran deal, one final thought. There are some unintended consequences of the Iranian deal. Most importantly, Assad of Syria will certainly stay in power. Why, you ask? Because now Iran can and will keep him in power. Iran has the money now and the intent, and they will not give him up, especially now that they have such a huge victory over the Sunnis and the West in the form of the nuke deal. Coming up next, points of view. Here's what some important voices have been talking about. First up, a column from the New York Times. It was published on Saturday, July 18th, 2015, and is authored by the regular columnist Roger Cohen. We have looked at Roger Cohen's work in the past, and we have spoken about his history. Cohen spent a few months earlier this year in Israel. Cohen is Jewish and originally from England. He suffered anti-Semitism as a youngster and spent long periods of time in Israel. Cohen loves Israel. There's no question about that. He is just what I call a haaretz Israel lover. They are informed by and then take the point of view of this leftist paper, Haaretz, and that is their stance. They are often more liberal than even their Western counterparts. The White House fits into this category. Anyhow, Cohen's piece defends Obama and the deal with Iran. He says it's the best possible deal for everyone, including Israel, and the Republicans should realize that. This is how Cohen begins. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel calls it a historic mistake that permits Iran a sure path to nuclear weapons. A minister in his government, unable to resist outrageous hyperbole, calls it one of the darkest days in the world history. Jeb Bush, doing the tired Chamberlain Obama number, dismisses it as appeasement. Cohen here is setting up the argument that Obama and Kerry literally created the best possible deal. Here's how he continues. Quote, so what do the critics from Republican presidential hopefuls to the Israeli government seek in place of the deal with Iran that verifiably blocks Tehran's path to a nuclear weapon for at least the next 10 to 15 years? Presumably, they want what would have happened if negotiations had collapsed. That would be renewed war talk as an unconstrained Iran installs sophisticated centrifuges, its stockpile of enriched uranium grows, Russia and China abandon the sanctions regime, moderates in Iran, like the foreign minister, Mohammad Javad Zarif, are sidelined, and a nuclear-armed Islamic Republic draws closer. Toward the end of his piece, Cohen gives the recipe for the success of the deal. This is what he says, quote, many possibilities have been opened by this accord. They include the doomsayer's vision of dissembling newly solvent Iran at work to subversive anti-American ends. Strict verification is imperative, but Congress should think twice before the feel-good reckless adoption of a resolution condemning a deal that advances American interests. Obama would veto it and almost certainly has the votes to resist an override. But this would be a regrettable way for the nation to assume such a ground-shifting agreement. The president is right to invoke the bold accords of past presidents, both Republicans, with hostile regimes in Beijing and Moscow. Neither was risk-free. Both proved transformative, not only of bilateral relations, but the entire world. And he concludes by telling Israel what it should do to make the best of the situation. Here's how he ends, quote, Israel, too, should ask the hard questions rather than dismiss a deal that puts Iran much further from a bomb, empowers Iranian reformists, locks in American-Iranian dialogue, and will be leveraged by Netanyahu to secure more advanced American weapon systems. The darkest days in history for the Jewish people were of an altogether different order. They should never be trivialized, unquote. Cohen is wrong in his assessment of how Israel must now respond. He might be surprised to learn that Israel is doing exactly as he suggested. Next up, a column from the New York Post. It also appeared on Saturday, July 18th, 2015. It originally appeared in Bloomberg View and then was published in many other places around the world. The column is by Daniel Gordis. Gordis is originally from the United States and now lives in Jerusalem. He's the vice president of a think tank, now also a college in Jerusalem called Shalem, and is a prolific writer and a frequent lecturer across the U.S. He speaks about Israel. Gordis is a thoughtful and probing thinker. He's a centrist and a true defender of Israel. This piece is entitled, Why the Iran Deal Leaves Israelis Feeling Abandoned. Gordis begins his piece describing how he and his wife left Jerusalem and went north to get some quiet, and instead were welcomed with bombs and artillery. He then got a call from his son in Poland. His son was with a group of soldiers marching through the forest where Jews had been massacred by the Nazis. He sent them a video to watch the march. The juxtaposition of power and powerlessness was set. Gordis explains why Israelis are so nervous about the Iranian deal. He does it in his conclusion by quoting headlines from the website The Times of Israel. And that seals his message. Listen. On the Times of Israel's website, Thursday, 4 headlines appeared. Quote, Netanyahu on Iran deal. The more you read it, the worse it gets. Was followed by former Auschwitz guard indicted as accessory to murder. Just under that was daughter badly hurt as Paris Jewish family attacked at home. And finally, there was U.S. presents draft of Iran resolution to Security Council. Gordis shows us his point. Israel and the Jews are facing hard times. Israel must defend itself. No one else will. Here's how Gordis ends. He says, the proximity of those articles on the Iran deal, the Holocaust, and Europe's resurging anti-Semitism reflects the sentiment here, and not enough has changed in the 70 years. That video our son sent of Israeli soldiers marching somberly through the Polish forest spoke volumes this week. True, Israelis can now defend ourselves, but our ability to do so was just significantly curtailed. In ways more harrowing than we might once have imagined, we know we are still surrounded, and increasingly it feels like we are once again alone. Coming up, commentary through cartoons where pictures tell the story. I want to look at a few cartoons today. All these cartoons come from the Arabic press, from Iraq, from the United Arab Emirates, from Saudi Arabia, from Lebanon, from the Arabic paper published in London. The first cartoon is from Al-Quds Al-Arabi. This is an independent Arabic paper published in London. The cartoon has 3 parts. Iranian Foreign Minister Zarif is speaking, and inside his speech bubble is Obama with the pen dressed as the devil. The Arabic reads, reached a deal with the devil. Then, in the lower left-hand corner is Netanyahu. A caption reads above him, Netanyahu is going crazy. The cartoon is obvious. The style of Arabic cartoons, by the way, is that there is nothing subtle about them. The Iranians have made a deal with their worst enemy, and it is making Israel nuts. Of course, it is also extremely critical of Iran. They have given up on their basic rule not to deal at all with the United States. The next cartoon comes from the official Iraqi press. It's a morphed picture and photoshopped, more than a cartoon itself. The picture is of Zarif, again, Iranian's foreign minister, hopping over Obama. There's no caption. Again, the point is obvious to all. Iran and Zarif were playing games with the United States and easily just jumped over the US to get what they wanted. The third cartoon is from a Saudi paper. The writing reads, "Stepping over the Middle East to get a deal." Uncle Sam is chasing Iran over a huge prone body on the ground, the Middle East. This is a theme I found in many different cartoons over the Arabic press, in the Arabic world. The point here is that the deal really has nothing to do with the stability of the Middle East. Actually, the Middle East will now be less stable. The Iranians and the Americans never really considered the region in their deal itself. The next cartoon also comes from the Saudi paper. It has Ayatollah opening up an oil pipeline, and the Iranian's mouth is wide open, filling up with cash. The caption reads, "After the deal, money is just streaming right into Iran." Once again, it's obvious. The deal is a huge moneymaker for Iran. There were dozens of cartoons that articulated this theme. Here's another one, only from Lebanon. Again, Zarif is the character, and he is floating away with a hot air balloon filled with money. Finally, the last cartoon is from the United Arab Emirates. It has two panels. It's a before and after cartoon. The panel before reads, "Little Iran before the deal." The second panel reads, "Huge Iran after the deal." For those of you who noticed, the first panel of Little Iran is on the right, and the second panel is on the left. That's because Arabic, like Hebrew, reads from right to left. In a moment, my own perspective and a few predictions. The tide is once again shifting in Syria. The position of power is once again firmly in the hands of Assad and Hezbollah. Earlier, ISIS made serious advances in Syria, but in a pretty quick turnabout, Assad and Hezbollah successfully repelled ISIS and al-Qaeda, and they are now in control of nearly every large city and every major highway and thoroughfare in the country. ISIS leaders are being killed by air attacks and drone strikes in Syria. In addition, Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah went on YouTube and shouted that ISIS has a choice: leave Syria or be killed in Syria. Nasrallah and Hezbollah are taking advantage of the momentum. There is no doubt that Hezbollah and Assad forces will search out and seek revenge on ISIS and al-Qaeda fighters. No prisoners will probably be taken. Anyone found hiding or defeated in battle will probably be butchered and paraded as examples of what happens to those who dare cross President Bashar Assad and Hezbollah. Hezbollah cannot do it, but they will try to match the brutality of ISIS. They must publicly display acts of brutality in order to regain the sense of honor they lost over the past year as ISIS-inspired fear crept into the hearts of many local Syrians. In watching ISIS, we are seeing that they have a serious training program for child fighters. They captured these children, mostly Yazidis, and butchered their families. Then ISIS took them, converted them to Islam, and began indoctrinating them. They made them into child warriors. Part of the training was to cut off the heads of dolls. The children had all been shown videos of beheadings and told by their trainers with the Islamic State group that they would perform one someday. First, they had to practice the technique, and more than 120 boys, each given a doll and a sword, were told to cut off the heads. A 14-year-old boy was among the boys, all abducted from Iraq's Yazidi religious minority. He said he couldn't cut it off right away. He chopped once, twice, 3 times. The boy said, "They then taught me how to hold the sword, and they told me how to hit. They told me it was the head of the infidels." That is what this one boy, renamed Yahya by his IS captors, told the Associated Press in northern Iraq, where he fled after escaping the IS training camp. In 2 real YouTube videos from a few weeks ago, one had a young boy cutting off the head of a Syrian soldier. The other had a group of very young children executing Syrian soldiers who were in a line and sitting on their knees. The young boys behind them then shot the Syrians all in the back of the head. I recently saw a Hamas video that purports that they saw former IDF Chief of Staff General Benny Gantz in their crosshairs right across the border from Gaza. The video shows him out of his vehicle inspecting the region, rifle in hand. The purpose of the video is to say that Hamas could have shot Gantz, Israel's chief of staff. That would have been a serious blow to Israel. The entire episode took place supposedly last summer during the conflict with Gaza. It is unlikely that the video is real. This part is propaganda and threats that Hamas uses all the time. IDF protocol is that everyone, especially the chief of staff, must wear a helmet and a flak jacket when near the border. There is no way, none, in the midst of the summer conflict last year, that Gantz would be anywhere near the border without a helmet and gear on. This is propaganda of the highest order, spliced together to try to trick Israel and instill fear. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. Did you know that the word peace derives from the Latin word pax? Pax in Latin means agreement or treaty. Today, we define peace by its antonym, its opposite, a negative definition. Peace is the absence of war, or a status of non-belligerence between parties. On a different level, peace is also defined as a state of mind, of tranquility. In Hebrew, the word shalom means peace. Everyone knows that. But its etymology stems from the word shalem, or completeness. That is to say, the ideal status, the complete status of two parties, is to have agreements between parties where they live together and mutually help, furthering themselves and one another. The perfect example is that of marriage. Peace in the Western world means the absence of war. For the Romans, it meant an agreement that was beneficial. And in Hebrew, it actually means that the parties will grow together and build something even better than what they have individually. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double high or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to Jim, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.